Ah, Hello, everyone. Today I have a wonderful guest, Jonathan Pageau, for the second time on on my channel, which makes me incredibly privileged and happy. Thank you, Jonathan, for your time. You're sincerely welcomed.
Oh, it's great to see you again, Pavel.
So, what I want to explore today is, in effect, a continuation of our previous conversation because there are many topics and themes raised back then, like I think it was in May, and much more to, but there is still much more to explore. Uh, I will put in a link to this video an article which I published on a Symbolic World, which will be referenced quite often, I think, or at least I hope several times during our today conversation. And so for everyone who wants, please take a look. So, but my first question will be more general. I noticed that generally speaking, you tend to avoid talking about, let's say, political phenomena in most of your conversations, videos, projects. There are some very huge notable exceptions, like your ARC paper, which I still recommend to reading because it was a very interesting content for you to a little bit step into the field. But can I ask you more broad question first? Could it be that you might think that nowadays we kind of live in a time where political language is simultaneously an opposition to symbolic language and theological language, but also is used as a substitution to it.
Hmm. Well, I think that my hesitation to talk about politics is mostly because I don't believe that the solution to our problem lies there. And so that's one. The second one is also because the political in the normal world is something which is should be very close to you, right? It's the life of the polis, it's the life of the city in which you live, and it's it should be understood as a place where your activity can make a difference, and can be part of the process of people getting along or not getting along or whatever. Uh, and I think that one of the things that's happened, let's say in the 20th century, since World War II, it's accelerating more and more, is the pervasiveness of political discourse on a global scale, which is that now we have this situation where we basically are pulled into discussions about what's happening everywhere in the world. And that is happening both in terms of media, but it's also happening in the West because of immigration. It's like you go to downtown Montreal. I went to downtown Montreal a few weeks ago, and there's this huge demonstration of Venezuelans that are demonstrating about Venezuela in Montreal. And we know now that there are constant demonstrations about Palestine everywhere in the rest of the world. And so one of the things that the kind of globalism has done is that it's made politics everywhere, right? And that is, to me, that is destructive. It's destructive personally to the person to think that they are always concerned about everything that happens everywhere in the world. um, that is destructive to the person, but I also think it's destructive to the actual polis, which is the actual participation in your everyday life. So, we have this idea, and I am suffer from the same problem, which is that the real stakes are here at the national level. Trump versus Harris, that's what really matters. But get involved in my own town, in my own community, in my own, yeah, that's boring. Like that doesn't make a difference, right? So I think that this is the one of the reasons why I don't talk, especially about international politics, very much. Like you said, there are some notable exceptions. The ARC paper was there mostly because I think that it was there to introduce a different way of thinking about politics, different way of thinking about identity, which I think is a better solution to the culture war and to all the madness that you see of people getting sucked into every little nonsense, and all the political commentators, because I kind of follow some of them and I can watch them just, it's just hook, bite, and then you go in. Uh, there are bigger questions to ask, like even in terms of politics. Sorry, I'm going so long on this, but I think it's
Oh
important to set
no.
at the outset, is also, one of the things people don't ask enough is, why am I asked to care about this particular thing right now that has nothing to do with me? What are the forces which are making me care about this conflict, and I don't even know that this conflict exists? Like, Somalia is being bombed every day. I never heard about it. I don't know about that. What? Really? Somalia is being bombed every day? Yeah, yeah. Somalia is being bombed every day, and it's been happening for years. Uh, and this is the situation where you have these weird things where conflicts all of a sudden become salient artificially, I think, for certain reasons, and others are just ignored, and it's on the international scale. You could say, uh, on the local scale, why certain things become salient. It's because they're relevant to my life. If the town here decides to put a highway over my house, then I'm going to care about that, and I'm going to get involved in the polis and involved in the politics and go to the meetings and fight for my participation in this city. So all of these are the things that people, I think, have to remember, you know, constantly, which is that I'm Canadian. I'm not American. I am not going to get involved in American politics, or at least very little, because it's just not my country.
I think you raised several important questions in your answer, which is always a great mark. Basically, and it kind of comes to the problem, which I think the key issue is that the language of political. You're absolutely right when you were describing these problems, uh, which comes up to mind when even we raise the question of politics or community in modern day language, etc. Like politics must be something big, something flashy, something from the outside. But don't you think that one of the main reasons for it is pretty fundamental, that our very basic understanding of exactly what community is, what a polis is simply off the mark, and it's been off the mark, let's say, not for like today or yesterday, but for, I would argue, at least for 100 years.
Mhm.
And I think the way to help people to understand what I mean by this is to highlight the link between community and communion. And I think that's where the language of symbolism can come into play. Like, I don't know if you thought about it, but basically it would be interesting to hear your opinion, because I think it's on a surface if you start thinking about it, but at the same time it has a very huge implications. That if you
Yeah.
think that community is not just a contract, like it's connected with the bigger reality. What do you like?
No, I
Would you
totally
agree with it?
agree. No, I completely agree. By the way, for people who haven't read the article,
Mhm.
I'm sure going to link to it. It's a great article because it goes into, some of the things that I talk about, but it does it, quoting Hobbes directly and talking, using examples directly in the Enlightenment of how there's a transformation that's being brought about in terms of this notion, like you said, of something like the fact that we are these individuals that are free floating, and that we need to create a kind of illusion of unity in order to tamper our passions and tamper the wildness of the individual, uh, and that creates this serious problem, which is definitely the one that we're in now. And so it's possible even to think, you don't necessarily address that directly in your article, which is that the end point of thinking that, right, that we have these kind of artificial constructs that we create in order to tamper us, and to, that the end of that is to say, well, couldn't we just have one for all people? Like, couldn't we just have one, right? Couldn't we just have a global state? Because anyways, it's all a kind of artificial construct anyways. It doesn't really matter, and if we could do that, then we could just have one state and then a bunch of free floating individuals, and that would be a kind of ideal of the vision.
Uh, well, since you mentioned it, I think basically what we are dealing with, and that's why I'm a little bit, one can say, even pushing you with my question. We're in a state where we, I think, actually need the language of symbolism and the language of even religious philosophy to talk about the most fundamental political things. because it's all related to these processes. As you like to say, they are playing out. Like you cannot understand the drive for this global unification. You cannot understand the drive for this creation of universal Tower of Babel on, let's say, this like actually I think it's happening right now. There is happening like a big UN summit with something together for the future, where effectively it's discussing again another version of the world government. That's sorry, like with global censorship, with global control over resources, all these things like, and it's very easy to, let's say, brush it out as madness, or exactly to talk about is, let's say, just for example, like people like to do in a classical political analysis, which you find so annoying that, oh, this is this power group and this wants this and this wants this, and that is the secret plan for them to make more money out of this. And you are missing the most important thing, I think, which is the actual first statement of political theology, because what political theology actually says that all political processes are theological and teleological processes in nature. This in the same manner as let's say human life is teleological and theological.
Mhm.
And like if we go into this, then actually on the one hand everything becomes clear what is happening even in political reality, but at the same time it becomes very difficult to talk to people who are not familiar with the language, because such language become counterintuitive. At the same time, I would argue it is the only language which can actually explain why and um, what is happening. And coming back to what I was writing, and it's kind of my back question to you, uh, whether you support this idea or not, that effectively for the last 400 years, all, let's say, the key symbolic conflict, like that's how symbolism, I think, comes into play, and I want maybe first for you to explain to other people the difference between symbolic and virtual. I think that's one of the very key understanding to understand the difference between in the nature of political processes, let's say pre-enlightenment, pre-modernity, and post-enlightenment, post-modernity. So if you can help, like
I mean, I'm not sure I
what
completely
I.
understand your question. I mean, I'm not sure how it is you want me to,
Mm,
because I think that I want to be careful. You know, I think
okay,
that,
I will rephrase. Basically, people, let's say, why symbol is not an illusion. Why symbol
okay,
is
yeah, I
more than
understand
an,
what you mean.
but
Yeah,
why
yeah,
symbol is
yeah.
more than just an illusion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I I think that, like, because you can, a way to understand it is to understand it kind of fractally, right? As the person, and the fact that humans have multiplicity in them, we have different ideas, and Hobbes is right about that, right? But what he's wrong about, and what he doesn't seem, at least in my perception, to understand, is that those multiple desires are resolved. They're resolved in the person, and they should be to some extent resolved in the person, because that's the vector of unity of those desires. But once you start to think that in some ways they're out of control, that there's this out of control desires in you, and all you are is an unconscious stream of desire, not that you're not that, because we are that to some extent, then exactly this weird idea that the communion between us is not something which is real, because he doesn't seem to see it at the level of the person already, right? And so it's these artificial constructs that are there, whereas just as you can know that as a person, sometimes you get pulled in different directions. You can feel it inside you. Everybody feels it. But you can also act with unitary purpose and unitary direction. And you can also experience that in you. And in the same way, humans are made to create or to participate in those bodies as persons with each other. And so the communion of love that you talk about in your article, which is really the true way in which people can bond together towards higher bodies, is already something that happens inside you. uh and that is, and to imagine these free floating particles, right? That they're not by their own multiplicity called to join into unity by that very fact, and that there is such a thing as only multiplicity. That type of intuition is wrong, and it creates the problem that we talk about, which is in some ways to understand the state as an artificial constraint that is top down on free floating particles, whereas that is not how it happens in you. That's not how it happens in anything, and it's also not how it happens in people. Like the best, people. It's weird how people, even the way that people think about the past, because we're so ruined by
Mhm.
media and movies and stories. It's like you know, a 15th century peasant loved the king. I know you don't like that. I know people don't like
I
that.
like it.
I know,
Just to be
but most
clear.
people don't like that because they think that no, it's always just oppression. It's always like no. The 15th century peasant loved his king, and the 15th century peasant would excuse the king constantly, even sometimes wrongly would say, oh, the reason why the king is doing this is because he doesn't know that there are people around, like this is and you think that this is, but this is totally natural. Like this is a natural way because we exist in this body and we have to live in this body. And therefore, to imagine always our leaders as duplicitous and false and as power hungry only as that is to destroy the very communion in which we live. And so the way in which, let's say, normal ancient societies function was usually like that. So once in a while there could be obviously a horrible leader, and that can happen.
Quite often, even
Yeah, of course.
even be realistic. Like
Even, yeah,
if
to be
you
realistic, quite often, exactly. uh but even if that happened, like you could be caught by lower forms of this, right? Like, so let's say you get a really horrible king, but then at the level of a lower level, which is, my town, my city, my parish, my community, then you can be caught by that, right? Whereas in this vision of the free floating passions of the person, it's illusion and tyranny all the way through,
but
and there. But
sorry, go on, go on.
yeah, but I think that's what you were referring to, right? Which is that
Uh,
this idea that power structures, that what we consider power
mhm.
structures, are just artificial and are not actually natural to the binding of people together.
Well, I was actually referring even to slightly, I would say, more general problem, like which is uh, what I think underlies actual the Hobbesian worldview, not maybe Hobbes per se, but what we developed after it, let's say the Enlightenment project, is even a bigger philosophical debate about what is real. I will
Mhm.
bring it to it, like
Yeah,
because
yeah,
let's say if you consider that the only real thing is something which is quantifiable and something which is material, then automatically it leaves you with a way fewer let's say, options for the way you see your society and the failures of your society. You mentioned it that, for example, peasants love the king and like they even were very tolerant to human mistake. Well, one of the reasons because they were understanding that it is human. Like I know very well you mean like in the folk stories and even like ethnography, like even in the 19th century Russia, basically the often peasants' attitude towards, let's say, a Tsar was pity. Like they were pitying him because it's such a heavy, effectively job to carry. It's such a heavy cross to bear. Like it was understood as a cross. And in a sense, it is true. But if you consider that the whole reality is a mechanism, that everything can be arranged rationally, that everything can be, let's say, created perfectly to minimize the failures, then you end up in this vicious cycle, vicious pattern. And you lose the most important thing of what the communion is, even while you are still doing it. I think that's the key
yeah.
problem. The key
Yeah, you
problem here.
reduce communion to bureaucracy. Like exactly, that's exactly what we saw in the modern state, which is the reality of people living together and having to negotiate and to share and to have conflicts and all of that, and that out of that you need obviously to have certain people that are legislators, that are rulers or whatever, but to transform that into a machine, like you said, a bureaucracy of management, of statistics of people, it leads to, I mean, yeah, it leads to what we have to deal with.
However, like I think it's not even that it's important to understand now, but it's only a first step, and that's what I think. I try to convey, and maybe in future conversations we go into deeper it because I think it's only tier one illusion. Like the truth is that despite that, that's what we think the community and politics is, we act in a completely different reality. And
Hmm.
what I mean is like, say, we can change the basic principles of any of the functions of any new entity. And for this, I'm very grateful for all of your work you've shown. Like, basically what I'm saying, regardless whether we think that a political community is a church, it is still a church. You might
Hmm.
not think it is. You might pretend it's a rational agreement. You might pretend that it is like something we, like rational beings, signed up here, but it still functions according to the laws of political theological reality. It still functions as a effectively church. It still
Hmm.
is united by the same sacred center. And it is exactly sacred. And the very simple answer to it, like how to prove it, let's say to demonstrate, is the attitude. You don't treat it rationally. You treat it something as a holy. In case of America, for example, it's the Declaration of Independence. It's not just a paper. It's the same as the covenant. It's the same as the Ark of Covenant. Like, and it functions in the same way. But
Oh
we
yeah.
don't have the language to talk about it in the same way. And that's a huge gray zone where many different tricks are happening.
Yeah.
I don't
And but it's but you could also kind of see it as a progressive erosion though of that way of functioning, which is that, you know, let's say, and it's manifested in the breakdown, let's say in the spreading out of the let's say of the suburbs. I always use that example as a good example because, you know, my suburb has no identity. Like no one cares about
Mm.
it. It has no say center. It has no, you know, you barely know who the mayor is. Doesn't really matter because they're all being managed by the state anyways, and that's where they get most of the funds seem to come from there more even from the taxes. And so there's this like weird top-down thing that happens even in terms of our communities. Uh, you know, and so then it gets projected higher up. You know, and America is a good example of one that's holding to some extent, but in Canada, you know, Trudeau said we're a post-national nation. We're a nation of openness. Like our only value is inclusion. And so it's like it's you know, and it's very dangerous to the existence of the it's a very dangerous to the cohesion of our society, right? To move in that
Oh,
direction
absolutely.
because you're right that we need those. We need some kind of center to recognize who we are and how we participate. But as we kind of deconstruct them, you know, possibly the purpose is again to put them higher, right? Like
Purpose is
we
definitely to put them higher, but I think it's very, basically, sorry, maybe I didn't convince this idea correctly. I think even need is not strong enough. It's not just the fact that we need these centers, it's the fact that we end up having them, no
yeah, no
matter
matter what.
what we think we no no matter what we think it is. And in case of the you brought the idea, for example, of inclusion, basically, as you well know, the human nature and the human creativity is very talented in creating idols out of literally anything. So inclusion can become the idol around which you're trying to center your community. But you think about it as just, let's say, a neutral value or as a sort of a rational thought processes. You don't interact with it as with idol, but it
That's it.
interacts with you as
Inclusion,
an
inclusion is literally like etymologically, inclusion is a diabolical center because it is division. Like you can't make multiplicity the center. Like that's not possible. That is how you destroy something, is to say, I'm going to make the purpose of my car inclusion. What? You're going to make the purpose of your car inclusion? So it's like, I'm going to start like putting branches on it and like just adding stuff to it because I don't know what the purpose of it except for it to be inclusion. That's not, nothing can function that way. It's like a, it is a destructive gesture, but there is something obviously unconsciously there are still things that rise them that act as these weird, even that like it acts as a illusion of a center for a while, but ultimately it's leading to our, I
yes.
mean,
And
it's leading to something else taking its place. I don't know what exactly, but something has to come and fill the vacuum because you can't have inclusion as an identity. It's just it's a non-starter.
well, you will have basically the return of all gods, like because that's I think is the ultimate trick, like the second level trick, and like originally, like it takes generally quite a while normally to explain, but I think you will get it pretty quickly. The trick is that we act, let's say, as if, so what's the project of modernity and what is the project of enlightenment? Like that what you put in your theological and teleological foundation, the logos of a community. And every community is structured around a logos, like as you well know. So it reflects the logos and it's moving towards the logos simultaneously, and in this movement it becomes a community. And the idea of enlightenment, the idea of modernity, the idea of Hobbes, out of fear, as we discussed, because humans cannot be trusted, basically. So we don't put a real logos. Let's say, what I mean by real logos. If you talk to, let's say, an ancient tribe, and you say that they have their animal totem or their ancestor totem, they act to it as real. Even Zeus is real for an ancient Greek. It's not an Zeus is not an illusion. The
Mhm.
mammoth head on a stick, it's not an illusion. It's a real. So, and the people are united about this thing as it's a real thing. It's an invisible thing, but it's a real thing. The
Yeah.
idea of modernity is like we are above this. It's a simple story. It's a dumb folk story tale. So we're putting a illusion, a simulacrum, a construct, a holem, etc., 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 which I call virtual. Like that's what I kind of mean. So it's virtual in the sense that we created it and we understand that it is an illusion. We know that it is an illusion, but we expect it to act as if it's a real, and that's why our understanding of this process is effectively wrong, and we're constantly surprised why it's not working. Like
Right.
it's effectively a world which has cut itself from the heaven. It's a world that deliberately cut itself from the heaven and creates a simulacrum of a heaven on the lower level. And all political projects of the last 400 years are this. Like all of them are just different variations of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree that and it's it's one version of the existentialist nonsense, right? This idea that Sisyphus would just continue to roll his rock up the hill, even though he knows that it's going to come back down, and he knows that there's nothing up there, right, that will bind him to a purpose. Uh, that's not that's not how can I say this? Like you actually it runs out, right? It
It
runs out,
runs
and
out,
yeah, and
and
it's
it
gonna
has
be
to speed up.
satisfied.
And it's like basically a metaphor. Can I think is can be used as effectively as a drug trip. It constantly needs more, and remind that's why these projects are becoming shorter with each iteration. If you notice, that's a new big flash idea. But at the same time, that's why you can maybe never thought about it, but I think that's actually the reason why, let's say, all, and that's what I think is Gnosticism. It's partially what is Gnosticism is this like creation of this like virtual realities and political Gnosticism. Like we know the secret, let's say, knowledge of ideal of illusion of dialectics, and we move it forward, etc., etc. But that's why it's so important for us to control the speech, because those who control the speech, those who control the discourse, they control the illusion. And it is very ironic because we expect that we will seriously discuss and treat something which is we understand which doesn't really exist, as if it is the most important and as if it's the most like acting in our life. As this inclusion is just the biggest, let's say, the most visible example on
Yeah,
a
yeah,
modern level, but it was before, let's say, class. Let's treat class as the most important, or let's treat race as the most important thing. And it's going on, it's going on, but at the same time, it's only on a surface level. Uh, at least that's
but
what I
what do
would
you
say.
think is driving this? Because this is, I guess that's a good question, right? To say, because one of the things you see in your article and you describe, I think very well, is in some ways when you talk about Game of Thrones in the article, you all actually represent a character. I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but one of the characters basically knows that this is an illusion. They know
Oh,
that this whole thing is a charade, but they do it nonetheless. And
I would say two answers. One is simple, another is more exactly theological. Simple answer is is this exactly philosophical, the fear. We need to understand that the foundation of all political processes of modernity is fear, and Hobbes starts with fear because that's why it's so important to understand the time where he's coming from. He's coming from a time of religious wars. That's a very uncomfortable truth about human nature, that when you believe in something with your whole heart, it can lead to a lot of violence. The
mhm,
notion of martyr is the same as a witness. Effectively, to witness an idea is to be ready to die for an idea, let's say,
Hmm.
or to die in the pursuit of an idea. And it can lead to very messy things. Let's say 100 years of religious war in Europe, not good. So basically, what I think it's partially started out of good intention, and the good intention went well. If climbing towards the heaven is so painful and there is so much blood in the process, let's just subdue this thing. We are afraid of it. We are afraid of human nature. When generally we are afraid of human nature because the king can be tyrannical, the father can be oppressive, the mother can strangle its baby, etc., etc., etc. At the same time, the political structure can result in genocide. We are afraid of it, so let's substitute it with something we think we can control. So we cannot control a human heart, but we think we can control an institution. That's what I think is one half of the answer. And that's kind of, let's say, good intention, at least half of the answer.
And so, but so safety would be your.
Safety.
So
Safety.
basically, we just need to preserve ourselves, like just make
Even,
sure.
yeah, the comfort. Let's say, that's why it develops into what, let's say, Sergei Bulgakov, it's one of the Russian philosophers of the early 20th century, calls it amor lotsi, the love for a place. So the love. So let's close the heaven for ourselves. Let's focus on what is below, and let's try to make it as nice, as comfortable, as safe, as controllable as we possibly can. Like
Mhm.
that's one of the half of the answer. That's what the good intention is. But the uncomfortable truth, and that's what I think people don't understand even when they're involved in this process, is that what is really happening is even a bigger trick. And to understand it, I think you need to go a little bit to the art. I know one of your favorite bands is Dirt Poor Robins. And do you remember like their Enchanté song? They have this quote like, "And if we cannot raise the dead, we're gonna raise hell instead."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a great
No,
quote.
but I think that's if you're answering what is happening. So that's is happening because not only visible things are real in political reality. Basically, this logos around which the political community united, and that's why I brought the example of a tribe. They are not just ideas; they are embodied ideas. Let's say they are principalities, they are demons, they are angels, and they are acting as well. And that's what I think is honestly what is playing out. So thinking that you control the solution, that's why this image of Holland is so important. So you think you are trying to create safety. You think you are trying to create this mechanism. But
Hmm.
what in effect, you are becoming the vessel for the spirits you can't even
Okay,
understand.
I understand. Yeah, so basically what you're saying, what you seem to be suggesting is that in the desire to be safe and secure and in control and to protect ourselves, which makes sense, in this desire to cover ourselves, to protect ourselves, then we become the vehicle for forces that we don't even maybe even know. We like we because there are other agencies acting on us. Like there are other patterns playing through us, and then people don't even realize what's going on. And that is that what you meant when you said the return
Yes,
of the pagan
yes,
gods? Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes. That's what I meant by the return of the pagan gods, or demons, etc.
Yeah.
Because we lost. That's what I like about, let's say, medieval political language. They in their worldview, they do have place for this, and they understand that different forces can be. They, for example, can say something. Well, we sinned. That's why this calamity has fallen upon us. Like it's not a ridiculous phrase to say, and it is a very smart things to say because ultimately a community is what it remembers, and one can say it's a community is a reflection of an idol or a god or a principality or a logos it is oriented towards or it's prayed towards. But we lost this language in a pursuit of safety, because the pursuit of this higher original, the pursuit of the higher purpose is kind of whole problem of waiting for the second. It's kind of connected with the millenarianism. If you go deep into the medieval history, basically long story short, I think people got tired of waiting for the second coming.
Mhm.
They tried to build it on with their own hands. In a process, they created a lot of mess. Like you don't want to be in the 16th century Europe. It's really a lot of mess. And they started to desire safety. But the problem is, it's not just we who are in place. Basically, principalities have agency ultimately. And
Mhm.
I don't need you to persuade you in this, but like it is what is playing out. In a political process, but the modern political science simply cannot talk about it. Nevertheless, it is what is happening. That's why it becomes very ironic. In that sense, the tribe is smarter than modern, let's say, president, because tribe knows that when it prays to the god of its tribe, it treats it as a god. Whereas when modern president talks about diversity, equity, inclusion, or the Green New Deal, they don't know that they are praying, but they are. And that's what
Mhm.
I think the ultimate difference, like if you want to put this way.
Yeah. And I'm trying to see the mechanism that you're describing. I mean, I kind of see it. It's a little bit of a like it's not totally clear to me, but
Uh,
let's play out it. Let's give an
mhm.
example. Let me try to play out an example. Tell me what you think. And so the easiest one is greed, for example. Like money would be an easy one, which is that people say, "Oh, well, we need to be comfortable, we need to be safe, like we want to basically make this right." And in order to do that, without knowing it, they unleash, let's say, a an action in the world of and accelerate, let's say, economy in a way that you see happening, and this kind of desire to accumulate money and to accumulate goods and to do all that, and that becomes its own thing that now nobody can control. Like nobody who knows what the market is. Like nobody knows what the market is. Nobody knows what the stock market is, what these we are completely subservient to it. And then someone announces on the news, well, the stock market crashed today, and now all these consequences, people will like lose their houses, people will all these things are going to happen because the stock market crashed, and nobody knows what the causalities are. We're completely subservient to this thing that
Exactly.
we nobody can control, nobody can understand.
Yeah, even in this example, it can be even more put even more direct terms. Let's say so. We said that the increasing of human well-being is is the ultimate purpose of a state. For example, that's the phrase which is often heard. So let's say the
Mm.
material well-being. Well, and for this material well-being, we sacrifice literally, we bring sacrifices, like literal sacrifices. We sacrifice time, we sacrifice future, we sacrifice kids, quite literally. Let's say we sacrifice communities, etc., etc., etc. And we expect, like whether we admit it or not, that as a result of these sacrifices, we will receive this gold, increase of GDP, increase of this, etc., etc., etc. And the fun thing is that we can talk about this we are doing the things we can talk about what we are doing because think we are just following the numbers. That's what
Mhm.
I mean. So but it is a very multi-tier, like we can talk about quite easily right now because obviously you've been working on symbolism for so long. But if you try to explain this pattern, even though it's quite visible and it's not really hard to explain,
Yeah.
that when you're literally bringing sacrifices for the god of comfort. You're
Yeah, of course.
literally doing it, but like it looks, but you don't understand that you are doing it. You think you are doing just what a human economicus should do, for example, or what irrational things should do. And that's what I mean, and that's happening on all different like levels. Basically, I think it's an escapable thing. That's what I think the most humbling to get for many
Yeah.
people, because exactly this desire to control, this desire for safety. We wanted to create our own God. Like effectively what Leviathan is, what I'm sorry, let's say even in American Declaration of Independence, this creator who endowed with certain inalienable rights, he's kind of also not there. He's not present. Okay, he's endowed and then he's gone. So it's still kind of we are in control of these things. But the truth is that these things, you can never be in control of them, truly. And
Mhm.
and that's the main part, and that's what I think the bridge of this. That's what kind of trying to achieve and hopeful to work on this discipline exactly bring to bring the bridge between these two languages. It can in a similar manner that you but in a slightly but in the different aspect because there is a very uncomfortable truth. I don't know if you noticed it on like I don't know. Have you ever watched like horror movies like recently or something like this?
Not recent. I watched horror movies when I was younger, but
Okay.
I don't remember
Uh,
the last horror movie I watched.
okay. It's just there is a very interesting pattern falling there right now is that effectively the heavens are closed, but the hell is right here. And
Uh-huh.
that's what I think is the ultimate, like the demons, the supernatural, the evil entities, they're all there. And there is this conflict of a rational mind with all of these entities that cannot get it.
Yeah.
Like there's like
Yeah.
psychiatrist tries to understand whether it's schizophrenia or not schizophrenia.
Mhm.
But uh, in a way, it is a similar pattern what is happening in our understanding of political realities, because after we closed the heavens, like as a metaphor, and tried to focus on what is immanent, we could not stay there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's what I mean. If you cannot, but we made ourselves open from the things below, and we cannot escape but becoming a vessels on an individual and collective levels. That's what I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
is.
No, I mean that's totally right. That I mean, the René Guénon talked about this long time ago in Reign of Quantity. He talks about he calls it fissures in the Great Wall. You know, he says that the from the Enlightenment and the scientific moment, you know, we have this idea that we close ourselves off from anything, any spiritual influence, and the truth is that we did to some extent, and it worked, and that's why there are no miracles. That's why a lot of people, you know, they don't necessarily, they can't kind of see, they don't understand when they read medieval texts. They don't even know what it's talking about because it's like it's referring to some other reality that we even don't have access to. But like you said, the cracks are have been appearing now since at least World War II. I would say from World War II on, and the fissures in the wall are just spreading and spreading. I had never thought about the idea of that horror movies are in some ways like one of the manifestations of that, where it plays out in the story of the horror movie, which is exactly what you said, which is the story of the horror movie is the rational being against the demons. How can I believe in these things? This is impossible. It's still happening, even though I think it's not possible. All of these things, and there's no appeal to God, you know, in
The
the
heaven is closed. That's kind of this is the main feeling. We have the and but it's necessarily closed because we forgot the most basic political theological truths, and just to demonstrate, because if you don't mind, like if you have a little bit time, I just want to demonstrate on a couple images, like what I
sure.
mean that the
Yeah, yeah,
ultimate reality. Basically, the basic thesis is like whether you like it or not, what actually holds community together is a religion, is a covenant, and covenant is a religious by nature. And to show you the images, and then the question becomes what holds the covenant. And actually, there are a lot of imagery like which quite well shows that even though we don't know this, our ancestors did it. Like here is, for example, a sculpture
yeah,
like of an icon. Can you see well?
yeah, 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 yeah. I know that
Okay.
type.
But if you notice, it's a very interesting idea. So that's a Saint Nicholas of Mozhaisk.
Yeah.
Like it's a originally sculpture. There is also an icon version. And what is interesting here is that he holds the city. Like it's literally written right here that it's a city of Mozhaisk. Let's say so. But that's a very visible reflection of what the nature of political community is. Like it's not just about church. Like in any political community, there is this religious element, and the saint holds like the city. The principality holds the city. Or if you want to go, let's say, basically the derivative from it would be a phrase: an idea holds the city. But that I think is very was kind of try to bring this like to pretend to be scientific and not still going to the crux of it, because then the reasonable question was as an idea, whose idea is holding, how it's held, etc., etc., etc. Whereas, like you can see in this imagery that like it's pretty clear that the principality, the logos, is holding the unity together.
Hmm.
And once you remove this, once you stop this idea of a city, which is you see the border. So there is a border, there is a unity within the border, and it's not holding itself by itself. It's effectively still held by something external, and we
Yeah.
can see this in the imagery. And the ultimate imagery of it, I would say, is a very interesting idea. Like you know that the image of Pantocrator, like
Yep.
the Christ which holds things together. Well, in there is a story which I cannot unfortunately show you the image because it was destroyed in World War II, but there was a story in the city of Novgorod, like big on the most ancient Russian cities, and they were artists were painting this image on mm, the tallest part of a cathedral, and no matter how hard they tried to do, instead of a blessing gesture, the hand of the Lord was always kind of in a holding position. It was like as if it holds things, like.
Mhm.
And according to the legend, that there was after like 4 attempts, there was a voice from above that stop doing it. I am holding this city. Like, and
Mhm.
if you open my hands, then exactly the city will disappear. Like another example is like this image of from like Uspenia Cathedral. That let's see, it's a hand
Yeah.
that holds exactly people.
The people.
It's the people. It's the hand that holds the people. And in a way, the trick of modernity was to imagine we don't need this hand, that we can create our own hand that holds this hand.
Yeah.
But what happened as a result? Well, now we're still being held. but first not by this hand, by other hands, but the hands we can control. We think we control, but are in fact controlling us. And I think it's like very important to start talking about these processes on this level, because otherwise, as you said in your very opening statement, there is no interest in talking about them at all. Like there is no interest in talking about he said what, you said what, like what is happening, this flashes thing happened there, this other thing happened flashes there. Like I
Yeah.
don't know if you.
No, I think you're right. And there are many other images we could have used. The image
Oh
of
yeah,
the veil, protective veil of the Mother of
yeah,
God
oh
is
yeah.
a great image. You see that in the Western medieval age, Middle Age. You see also images of the Mother of God with like in her cloak, she has all these people, kind of like the hand. This idea that we are held together, and makes sense. And like you said, if we don't know what is holding us and what is driving us, then it's going to be forces that we don't even understand.
Like it's an example of what you're talking about. Like that's what you were talking about. Let's
Yes,
say there's a
exactly.
mother
Yeah.
of God, like, and exactly you see the multiplicities, different multiplicities. It's a relatively new Russian icon, but it's based on all of these differences. There's different versions of mother of God from different, let's say,
Mhm.
localities. There is an image of a land, but it is united with what, like, let's say, covers it. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
basically, yeah. And I think we like that's kind of comes to us as like symbolist, or let's say even Orthodox. Like basically my big discovery in like first, so I started, let's say, studying politics as a just traditional political scientist, etc., etc. And truth be told, I eventually found that it is just simply useless in many ways. It's not answering the real questions. It's not showing what's happening.
Hmm.
And then I discovered like basically this more traditional and then symbolic way of understanding the very same processes. But then we have figured it right now, which we're in a very interesting position. These two things kind of exist in separate realities. We don't really, connect
Hmm.
them. And I think, and that's why my question, the first question was like, whether you not wanted to, like, where comes this desire not to connect? Like because we want to separate us from this realities in a way, like we want to separate us from this conversation. But I think it's inevitable first that it's impossible because we're still living within these communities.
Yeah.
And secondly, if like basically if you don't provide an accurate account of something, an accurate account will be provided. I don't know, like if you don't talk, it's the same the problem of a culture war which you fight so much. If you don't participate in a culture, the culture will effectively participate in you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that that's the way I think that's the best way to understand it, uh, is, to, how can I say this, right? It's to help rebuild the real communities. That seems to be the only thing we can do. And that starts with yourself, and it starts with your own surrounding. It starts with your own vices and your own sins. And then it starts with, your family, like I said, your parish, the things that are around you. To me, that is in some ways the only way to go, because the problem, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't be involved in the politics of your country.
Oh no.
When it was COVID, I was making a lot more noise about politics because it was in my house and in my life, and it was my leaders and it was my country. And it wasn't like Donald Trump and Harris, or it wasn't a war in the Middle East, or it wasn't a war in Eastern Europe. It was something that was happening here. And
Mhm.
so I was far more vocal, and not only vocal, but organized on the street level, right? It's like I did go to the protest. I also, we reorganized our own network of associations in order to be able to thrive through the crisis. And so I'm not against politics. I think I'm wary of the illusion that getting involved in political discourse, especially on the internet, that it does anything except to
Uh,
just make the just
if
to make the go forward.
you're absolutely correct. I absolutely agree with you. And what I mean by involvement, and in terms of basically, I like that your answer was about what you can do. So immediately put into category of action, which is the key element. I just would add to this. Uh, range of advices. I think it's very important to, as you know, in the Genesis, like basically one of the main human, let's say, power of Adam is the power to give names. And that's what I think is where, like, what I mean by political activity. I don't mean by
Mm.
political activity, participate, what is expected, let's say, participation, or talking about taxes or talking about other things. I think what I mean when I talk about the building the bridge between these two realities is just naming what these things are happening. Let's say it's good to be, I think in order to rebuild communities, we need to just be clear what community is. Let's say
Yeah,
we
no, I
don't even
agree.
talk about that community is a religious phenomenon.
Yeah,
We still think that that community, any community and political community is such, and you can argue that as soon as you end up a community, it has a political side to it. Like, sorry,
yeah,
a
of
city has a political side to it. Even a district has, like, even a community or a village has a political side to it.
course.
And just to be, even at least to be capable of withstanding these different like elements, which is coming from the outside, you need to understand what you are. And for this, you need a language. And for this, you need a way to show, to describe, to just name the things the way they are. Because otherwise, it's hard to explain. Let's say what is exactly your opposition. Let's say was an idea of inclusion.
Yeah.
Let's say why are you exactly opposed? And we go into these very lengthy details about, let's say, well, that's a one rational argument for it. Well, that's a that's a, let's say, biological argument, etc., etc., etc. Whereas you can say, well, I just don't want to worship this idol. And I don't think that's what unites me. And since it's the idol which is proposed to be put in the center of my community, I oppose to it. That's what I mean by it. Like, I
Hmm.
just mean, I think building, and can be done, I think, ultimately first and like practicing it, like truth be told, this
Yeah.
kind of the same of acting. That's what I'm trying to do, like mostly in Russian, but that's what I'm trying to. When I talk about the different process, I'm trying to underlie like different basic patterns which are happening. Like why people are doing these irrational things. Well,
Yeah.
because that's what is happening.
But it
That's I think.
also, I mean, I also want to be careful. Like, I want to be careful that people don't think that I'm saying that
Mhm.
there's no room for political involvement, because one of the things too is that we also, different people play different roles.
Mhm.
Like we all kind of have different roles and different strengths and
Mhm.
different capacities in this world. And so there, I think that the role that I can play is more in terms of story and in terms of helping people understand the basic structures and helping them understand this question of participation. But I think that downstream from that,
Yeah.
there will be legislation. Like there will be people proposing laws. There will be people, uh, you know, redefining, levels of
Mhm.
authority and power, and understanding what those powers are related to our own. Like when I talk about a kind of fractal system of identity and authority, this is something that can have real consequences in the world, and can reform the way that bonds are exist. Uh,
Oh yeah.
but but I but I think that that's the work that has to be done first. And while that's happening, I'm also not. It's like while that's happening, I'm also grateful, for anybody who's able to slow the madness around
Oh
me.
yeah.
It's like when I watch Jordan Peterson
Oh yeah.
or even people that don't maybe like me that much. Like if
Mhm.
I walk James Lindsay, like just nonstop, like onslaught to stop the communists from coming back. I'm like, okay, that's great. Like we also need that because there's also the immediacy of the problem. But I can't like on myself.
Oh, I can tell you, you
Oh
are
my
doing
goodness,
it
like I just
actually.
can't.
No,
I
no, no, but
can't do it. It's like when
no.
because I feel like I'm getting sucked into a vortex of you know, yeah, this like spinning thing that doesn't
Yeah.
totally know where it's
Well,
going.
I think here I can actually cheer you up, or maybe it won't be that cheerful because knowingly or unknowingly, I think you are involved into these processes, and even bigger on the highest level, because in a real hierarchy of power, and like I don't have time to talk too much about it, the ultimate power is a power of a story, the power of idea, the power,
Mhm.
the story centricity. So by creating an alternative story, so more like reviving the true stories, like it is a political action, like it or not. That's why I
Yeah.
mentioned like because when the true story is revived, even let's say the revival of symbolical thinking as such, like the reviving of these images of unity, the reviving of your, let's say, image of the mountain.
Mhm.
Like you have a political impact. Like that's what I
Yeah.
think is inescapable, and we just need to understand what we are involved in. Like basically, whenever you are touching the um, issues of meaning, you are making a political action. Like, and that's in a very, that's why, for example, there was this original conflict between Christianity and the Roman Empire, because even Christians thought that they were not involved in the political activity. The Roman Empire thought very well that they were. Like, by the creating the complete alternative system of meaning, you willingly or not, you are participating into it. And I think it's a very just cool thing to be aware of, like,
Mhm.
in a good way. Like, so on the
Yeah.
most basic way. So effectively, you're just skipping the whole boring part and just going to the nuts of it, to the crux of it.
No, I mean I agree. I would say, yeah, I would say that there are definitely political implications to the things that I'm talking about and doing. But I ultimately I'll let other people work that out in my particular case, and also work it out more locally in their own
Yeah,
in their own sphere.
absolutely. No, it's just I think that's exactly the trick. Like, so what the kind of real like people, because people really ask what we can be done right now, etc., etc. And I think it's can be done on, unfortunately, kind of skipping the whole thing we've been holding the most important for the last, let's say, 400 years. This whole middle part, the part of a state, the part of administrative, etc., etc. It can be done on the one side, on the power of communities, what you mentioned, yourself, family, local elements, and at the same time on the highest level, which is the power of words, the power of ideas, the power of meanings, and only then there can be some connection involved through this, because the middle part right now we cannot even talk about it, and I think that's what kind of I mean the most. We cannot even talk about what is happening really. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
do occasionally, like and we can do occasionally, but realistically, on a most level, people don't understand. People don't understand, and we're not there yet to explain that. For example, the way people treat even the, let's say, presidential candidates or political candidates are idolic. They do treat them, like, they treat them as like, oh, that's the idol who will save this process, or this idol, and it's inevitable because we have no other unity. We don't have the hands that holds things together. So we are in we are inescapable processes of creating them.
Yeah, it's funny. It's actually quite it's funny to watch it happen. Like like in my country, it's even funnier because at least the president can have some kind of like pretension of being a central spoke that kind of holds things together. But in a prime minister, like in Canada, we treat our prime minister like the president, even
Mhm.
though our prime minister is the head of is an elected seat in the head of a government and and could be kicked out of his own party at any time that they vote against him, but we still treat him like a little king because it's like we just want, we like you said, it's just inevitable. And if people were more aware of it, then they would do it more reasonably than
And
in this
Schiller,
weird
and honestly,
unconscious
Schiller,
way.
yeah, and that's I think that's one of the big reasons of where the whole neurotization of the whole political processes is coming from, because what people the actual desire of people in their, let's say, political figures and other things, is way different from what they think the desire is. So they
That's
want the
right.
unity, they want a god to worship, but they say they want, I don't know, free healthcare, and it's not the thing. Like
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
not
Oh,
what.
that's so right. Yeah, that's so right. And then it's also this, like, how can I say this? It's also this idea that if the wrong president, let's say the wrong president is elected, if the wrong prime minister is elected, then we're going to live in hell. Like it's all going to fall apart. Like everything is finished because everything just depends on this like little this guy. And like I said, if you ask someone if they believe that, they would say, "Of course I don't believe that." But everybody acts as if that's the case. Um and when in fact, like we intimated at the outset, there are real principalities that are moving these things along, and those are the, let's say, the gods that are kind of moving the system are invisible to most. Like we worship them without totally knowing it, or we worship through these proxies, and we can't see what it is that is managing us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, and well, sometimes they even say it. Like, I don't know if you. I mean, I know you are following it, but as it's exactly, I think it's my favorite of your videos, and when you, for example, take some event and you show like the symbolism on this event, which pretends not to be symbolic at all. You can see in Paris Olympics that was just sorry, that's principalities are literally there. Or you can see on all of these, let's say, environmental meetings when they almost literally nowadays worship Gaia,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
almost literally,
Oh, yeah.
and sometimes literally,
Yeah.
like, and you pretend that it's neutral, it's not religious, but it's like it's just think, and that's what I mean. And everybody else kind of have to. But that's what I think. I think the one of the main reasons people are participating in these games is because they don't know they don't have to, and they don't have a language not to have to, and that's what I mean. Like you can just
They
it's
also don't
still
have an alternative. They
yeah,
don't have something to truly worship that is worthy of their worship. And I think that that's one of
absolutely.
the things that can help is that if you know what the source of reality is and you understand the nature, well, you don't understand it, but you direct your attention to the highest aspect, to the highest transcendent truth, then at least you know like how you're orienting yourself. But like you said, everybody needs that, and because they deny it at the outset, they end up grasping at all these different principalities that just appear and disappear. And uh yeah,
And then
so
you can actually ask the important question. If we have to be united through the worship of a principality, let's maybe be careful about which one we are worshiping. Let's choose at least the real one. Let's not choose the illusionary one.
yeah, let's not choose a parasite, something that is actually feeding on you in order to maintain its existence,
Because the
and
real, because the principalities are real. For example, like you can, like as we mentioned, like the way we treat so many different things, like progress or especially progress and economy, like mostly like that kind of the two main things. Some
progress
others
is the
is.
best one because it's what is this progress you're talking about? Open progress is what people worship.
Yeah.
There's actually no telos. It's like it's something like inclusion. It's like,
Well,
oh,
there
with
is
this.
Talos. It's exactly the Talos of receiving gold, and like effectively, it's sorry, I know. I mean, in that sense, it won't sound crazy. It's literally not different from Carthaginians worshipping the Moloch. Spartan is literally exactly the same, and I actually think I wouldn't be surprised if Progress and Moloch has one of the same name because you bring your future in a view of your firstborn,
Mhm.
and there are like slaves and all of the different things, and you get the biggest material prosperity ever seen on a planet by that time. I don't see much difference in the way that people treat progress. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's
that's interesting.
and they also expect immortality from it just on top of it. Like now they just also expect immortality from progress. That's
That's an
kind of
interesting idea. Even like the idea of credit, like, because I've been trying to understand credit for years, but I just had an insight when you were talking about it, that credit is something like sacrificing your children. Like it really is. I can't believe I never thought about that, because what you're basically saying is I am going to sacrifice the future for now. And so I'm willing to sacrifice my children's life in order to get what I need right now. Huh. Yeah. That's such a great, it's such a simple insight. And I had never, how is it that I never seen that? I've said it similar to that. Like I've talked about the idea but I've never thought of it really as a kind of Moloch sacrifice, or like the idea of the sacrifice of your children. Well,
and
because
it's
I've
quite
talked about it in terms of abortion, like, because
yeah.
abortion is clearly that, right? It's like a woman says, I have this child in me, I'm going to kill it, and then my life will be better. It's basically saying, I want something now, and this future thing that's going to cause me all this trouble, I want to, uh, but credit is different, but it's something like that. It's
No,
something,
credit is similar treat. Like it's the same pattern, just playing out differently. If you're talking about, and even let's not go into the same, as even on a lighter levels than abortions, the pattern is still the same. That's why I think Moloch is one of the main gods of this kind of
Mhm.
at least capitalism, honestly, like or like
Yeah.
the capitalist structure. Because when person is saying, "Okay, I will sacrifice my family," or let's say nowadays a woman says, "I will sacrifice my family for a career, and then in 20 years I will maybe come back to it." It is, and the thing is the pattern. You notice. that this thing which is sacrifice is given, it is fulfilling a certain part of a deal. It is
Yeah,
bringing material prosperity. Just in the end, it will trick you as any demon will. But in a
yeah,
part, it brings you the prosperity. Let's say you want more money in your 20s, you will get more money in your 20s. It's OnlyFans. I'm sorry, I hate bringing
yeah,
this, but
yeah, yeah.
it's the same. It's literally the same. So you want your money, you will get your money. Are you dampening your future? Yes, but that's the part of a deal.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm seeing a lot of things that make sense. See, I also hadn't thought about the idea of people having children later in life as something like that as well, right? It's like I want my youth for myself, right? Instead of for others, instead of giving my youth to my children, right? Because usually that was the normal way to go, which is that you want to have kids, you want to have kids and your money and your wealth is spent on your kids. That's like a normal thing. But now there's this weird thing. Uh, Super interesting. Definitely stuff to think about.
because exactly we created these walls. Let's say we
Hmm.
created the walls, let's say, between symbolical and theological reality and let's say economical, political, and like sociological
Yeah.
reality. But it is a very modern understanding, and my article was in a way to show it's just it's very short and like there is much more to say. But it was a conscious effort to kind of separate these things. But the problem is by nature they are inseparable because as you well know, that's a human nature according to the fathers that we have like this desire for the immanent. We have this, let's say, horizontal desire, but we also have this vertical desire. And
Hmm.
we are inescapable of this pattern no matter how much we try. But nowadays we just spend like generations and hundreds of years in this separate state. So on a very deep level, we have these borders and we just don't connect the dots. But once you connect them, it kind of becomes clear what is happening and why it is
Hmm.
happening. Like the
Hmm.
question what to do, you already answered. But one thing is to understand, and that's what I think is like
Yeah,
just
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, makes sense. Listen, Pavel, I have to
yeah,
go
I know.
because I
So
have
sorry.
another appointment, but this is great, great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Well, then thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. I hope there will be more conversations between us to come. And